Picture an empire so vast it stretched from the Aegean Sea to the borders of India, a realm where Greek culture collided with ancient Eastern traditions to create something entirely new. This was the Seleucid Empire, one of history's greatest yet most overlooked civilizations, born from the ashes of Alexander the Great's conquests. But here's the thing, while its rulers and battles might fade into textbook footnotes, its cities tell a different story. Hidden beneath deserts, buried under modern towns, or simply lost to time, these urban centers were once bustling hubs of trade, art, and innovation. And then they vanished. Ever walked through the ruins of an ancient city and felt the weight of history whispering in the wind? Imagine not just one, but 30 of these forgotten places, each with its own secrets waiting to be uncovered. From the towering temples of Seleucia on the Tigris to the mysterious streets of Antioch by Daphne, these cities were the beating heart of the Hellenistic world. They thrived for centuries, blending Greek columns with Persian gardens, Babylonian astronomy with Macedonian military might. And then poof, they slipped through the cracks of memory, leaving behind fragments of pottery, cryptic inscriptions, and legends that tantalize archaeologists to this day. What happened to these urban marvels? Why did some vanish without a trace, while others were swallowed by the sands of time? That's the journey we're embarking on today, a voyage across 2,000 years to unearth the stories of 30 lost cities that once shaped the course of history. Some were destroyed by wars, others abandoned when trade routes shifted, and a few may still lie undiscovered, their names erased from every map, but their legacy lives on, hidden in plain sight. So grab your metaphorical shovel, we're digging deep into the rise, fall, and enduring mysteries of the Seleucid Empire's forgotten urban giants. Trust me, by the end, you'll never look at a crumbling wall or a half-buried statue the same way again. If one city could capture the dazzling ambition of the Seleucid Empire, it was Seleucia on the Tigris, a metropolis so grand it was said to rival Alexandria itself. Founded by Seleucus I around 305 BC, this wasn't just another provincial outpost, it was a statement carved in stone, the beating heart of an empire that stretched from the Mediterranean to the Indus. Picture a city built on scale designed to awe, with wide colonnaded streets, sprawling marketplaces, and temples that fused Greek gods with Mesopotamian deities. Its location was no accident. Perched on the banks of the Tigris River, it controlled the lifeline of regional trade, where caravans from Persia met ships sailing up from the Persian Gulf. But Seleucia's true magic lay in its people. Walk through its bustling agora, and you'd hear a dozen languages, Greek merchants haggling over silk, Babylonian astronomers debating the stars, Jewish scholars transcribing texts. This was a place where cultures didn't just collide, they intertwined. The city even minted coins with Seleucus's face beside the Babylonian god Marduk, a quiet revolution in stone and silver. Yet empires rise and fall, and Seleucia's fate was sealed by the shifting tides of power. When the Parthians swept in during the 1st century BC, the city's walls crumbled. Trade routes veered away, and the sands of time did the rest. By the 7th century AD, it was a ghost town, its libraries buried, its theaters silent. Today, the ruins lie just south of modern Baghdad, a maze of broken columns and half-excavated streets. Archaeologists still uncover fragments, a Greek-style statue here, a cuneiform tablet there, whispers of a city that once dared to bridge two worlds. So why did such a powerhouse vanish? Blame war, shifting economies, and the cruel irony of history. Even the greatest cities can become footnotes. But for 300 years, Seleucia wasn't just a city. It was the future the Seleucids dreamed of, until the dream faded into dust. While Seleucia on the Tigris symbolized the empire's eastern ambitions, Antioch on the Orontes was its glittering western crown jewel. Nestled along the banks of the Orontes River in what's now modern-day Turkey, this city wasn't just a capital, it was a sensory explosion. Imagine marble streets shimmering under the Mediterranean sun, lined with statues of gods and kings, while the scent of roasting meats and exotic spices drifted from bustling market stalls. Founded by Seleucus I around 300 BC, Antioch quickly became the empire's cultural showcase, a place where playwrights premiered comedies in grand theaters and philosophers debated beneath colonnaded walkways. At its heart stood the Temple of Apollo, a sanctuary so revered its priests were said to channel the god's prophecies. Pilgrims flocked here from across the Mediterranean, bearing offerings and seeking divine guidance. Nearby, the royal palaces sprawled like a city within a city, their mosaic floors depicting scenes from Greek myths and Persian epics alike. Antioch wasn't just wealthy, it was decadent. Writers of the time gossiped about its lavish dinner parties, where peacocks were served on golden platters and wine flowed from fountains, but prosperity bred envy. Positioned at the crossroads of empires, Antioch became a prize for conquerors. Roman generals, Parthian warlords, even rebel leaders, all took turns sacking its streets. Then came the earthquakes. In 115 AD, a Temblor shattered its temples and toppled its towers, rebuilt only to be shaken again in 526, then swallowed by fires. Each disaster chipped away at its grandeur. By the time Arab armies swept through in the 7th century, Antioch was a shadow of itself. The libraries were ash, the theaters silent. Today, you can still trace the outlines of its hippodrome beneath olive groves or stumble upon a mosaic peeking through the soil. But most of its splendor lies buried, a cautionary tale of how even the mightiest cities can crumble when nature and greed conspire. Antioch didn't just fade, it was erased layer by layer, a masterpiece painted over by time's relentless hand. Less famous than Seleucia or Antioch, but no less crucial to the Seleucid war machine, Apamea stood as the empire's unsung fortress, a city where strategy and horsemanship shaped history. Built on the lush plains of modern-day Syria, this wasn't just another military outpost. It was a cavalry powerhouse, a place where the thunder of hooves echoed as loudly as the debates in its forums. Founded by Seleucus I and named after his Persian wife Apamea, the city's true legacy wasn't just its loyalty to the crown, but its unmatched ability to breed the finest war horses in the ancient world. Imagine a landscape dotted with vast paddocks where thousands of sleek Arabian and Nicaean stallions were trained for battle. These weren't ordinary horses, they were the Ferraris of antiquity, bred for speed, strength, and unshakable nerve. The Seleucids knew their empire's survival depended on cavalry, and Apamea delivered. Its stables became legendary, supplying mounts that could outmaneuver enemies from the Himalayas to the Nile. Even Roman historians grudgingly admitted these horses were the backbone of Seleucid dominance in open combat. But Apamea wasn't just a barracks town. Its urban planning rivaled the empire's grandest cities, laid out in a precise grid stretching nearly 2 kilometers. Walking its main colonnaded street, one of the longest in the ancient world, you'd pass soaring limestone pillars, each fluted and topped with intricate Corinthian capitals. Shops selling armor and saddlery stood beside temples to Zeus and local deities, blending Greek and Syrian influences. At its peak, the city hummed with a unique energy, part military academy, part thriving trade hub. Disaster struck in 1215 AD. A colossal earthquake tore through the region, toppling Apamea's monuments like dominoes. Pillars that had stood for centuries cracked and fell, temples collapsed into rubble. The city never fully recovered. Later invasions by Persians and Arabs scattered its people, and eventually the once proud streets were reclaimed by wild grasses. Today, archaeologists marvel at the eerie beauty of Apamea's ruins. Its colonnades still stretch toward the horizon like skeletal fingers, and fragments of mosaics hint at lost grandeur. But perhaps the most poignant discovery, ancient hippodrome tracks worn smooth by generations of hooves, a silent testament to the city that armed an empire, one horse at a time. At the empire's eastern edge, where the Euphrates carved its path through sun-baked cliffs, stood Dura-Europos, a city so vibrant in its diversity, it might as well have been a time capsule waiting to be cracked open. Unlike the towering monuments of Seleucia or the gilded excess of Antioch, this frontier outpost thrived as a melting pot of cultures, languages, and faiths. Founded around 300 BC as a military garrison, it quickly grew into something far more fascinating, a snapshot of everyday life in the Hellenistic world, preserved almost perfectly by the very forces that destroyed it. Picture a bustling trade hub where Roman soldiers rubbed shoulders with Persian merchants, where Jewish settlers prayed in one of the oldest synagogues ever discovered, and where early Christians worshipped in a house church adorned with vivid frescoes. The city's walls bore witness to this cultural mosaic literally. Archaeologists peeling back layers of sand and debris found temples to Greek Zeus, Pomeran gods, and even a shrine to Mithras, each space decorated with art that blended artistic traditions from across the known world. One fresco from the synagogue shows biblical scenes painted in a style that wouldn't look out of place in a Roman villa, while the Christian baptistry's walls shimmer with figures that echo both Greek iconography and Syrian motifs. But Dura-Europos wasn't just a cultural crossroads, it was a military linchpin. Perched high above the Euphrates, its ramparts offered a commanding view of the river valley, making it a crucial bulwark against Parthian invasions. The city's engineers even devised an ingenious network of tunnels beneath its walls, a defensive measure that, centuries later, would ironically lead to its demise. When the Sasanians laid siege in the 200s AD, they dug their own tunnels to undermine the defenses, triggering a brutal underground war in the dark. The city fell, but the victors, perhaps unaware of their accidental gift to posterity, simply buried it under mounds of earth. That act of destruction became history's gain. The same arid climate and layers of sediment that smothered Dura-Europos also preserved it like no other Hellenistic city. When archaeologists began excavating in the 1920s, they uncovered wooden shields still painted with legionary insignias, private letters written on papyrus, even a Roman soldier's pay stub details that textbooks could never capture. These weren't just artifacts, they were voices from the past whispering secrets about tax disputes, religious debates, and the mundane rhythms of life in a city that once pulsed with energy. Today, Dura-Europos lies in ruins, its treasures scattered across museums from Damascus to Yale. But its legacy endures as a reminder that history isn't just about kings and conquests. Sometimes the most profound stories come from the places where ordinary people lived, loved, and left behind fragments of their world for us to piece together. Laodicea ad Mare gleamed like a jewel on the Syrian coast, a city where the Mediterranean's wealth flowed as freely as the wine in its harborside taverns. Founded by Seleucus I in honor of his mother Laodice, this wasn't just another port, it was the empire's glittering gateway to the world. Picture ships from Egypt unloading papyrus and glass beside Phoenician vessels heavy with Tyrian purple dye, while caravans from Mesopotamia disgorged spices and silks onto crowded docks. The city's wealth wasn't just visible, it was performative. Colonnaded boulevards led to bathhouses with intricate mosaics of sea nymphs, and public fountains spouted not just water but sometimes perfumed wine during festivals. The locals boasted that even the cobblestones shimmered, embedded with flecks of marble to catch the sunlight. Yet Laodicea's true genius lay in its harbor engineering. A marvel of Hellenistic ingenuity, its breakwaters and quays were designed to withstand the fiercest storms, while warehouses stacked with goods stretched for acres. The city became so vital to trade that its merchants funded their own silver coinage, stamped with the image of Poseidon, a nod to the sea that fed their fortunes. Travelers wrote of its opulence, how the scent of roasting fish mingled with incense from distant Arabia, how the laughter of sailors echoed in streets lined with statues of gods and kings. But the sea that gave Laodicea life would also seal its fate. Over centuries, relentless coastal erosion and river silting choked its once pristine harbor. The very trade that built its fortunes now migrated to deeper ports like Antioch and Tyre. By the Roman era, ships could no longer dock. The waterfront became a ghostly expanse of stranded piers and abandoned warehouses. Earthquakes in the 6th century AD dealt the final blow, toppling its grand monuments into the shallows. Today, the ruins of Laodicea, modern-day Latakia, hide in plain sight beneath a bustling Syrian city. Archaeologists sifting through layers of silt find traces of its glory. A crumpled bronze statue of a merchant, a mosaic floor depicting the god Oceanus, the stubborn foundations of those doomed breakwaters. The irony is palpable. A city that mastered the art of harnessing the sea was ultimately betrayed by it, its name lingering now only in faded maps and the salty wind that still whispers through its fractured stones. High in the rugged hills of northern Mesopotamia, Edessa stood as a cultural chameleon, a city where Greek philosophers quoted Homer alongside Syriac poets singing hymns to local gods. Unlike the planned grandeur of Seleucid megacities, Edessa grew organically, its winding streets clinging to rocky outcrops like ivy. Its rulers, the semi-independent Orontid dynasty, played a delicate game, paying lip service to far-off Seleucid kings while crafting their own hybrid identity. Step into its bustling marketplace, and you'd hear the clink of coins stamped with Greek inscriptions, but spend them on clay tablets inscribed with Aramaic spells meant to ward off evil spirits. The city's most striking legacy, its necropolises, carved into cliffs above the Dacian River. The royal tombs of Edessa weren't just burial sites, they were propaganda in stone. One chamber, dubbed the Tomb of the Seven Sleepers, blended Greek myth with local folklore, its walls depicting figures that could be Apollo one moment and the Syrian sun god Shamash the next. Nearby, a sarcophagus bore carvings of warriors in Macedonian armor kneeling before a deity with distinctly Mesopotamian features. These weren't accidents, they were deliberate fusions, a dynasty asserting its power by claiming dual heritage. But Edessa's strategic perch between empires made it a perpetual pawn. When the Seleucid grip weakened in the 2nd century BC, the city became a battleground first for Parthian horsemen, then Armenian kings, and finally Roman legions. Each conqueror left their mark, a Parthian-style arch here, a Roman aqueduct there. By the time Christianity took root in the 3rd century AD, Edessa had reinvented itself yet again as a center of Syriac learning, its scholars translating Greek texts into Aramaic while keeping alive the very pagan traditions the new religion sought to erase. Today, modern Shanliurfa sprawls over much of ancient Edessa, but hints of its layered past remain. The fabled pool of Abraham, where sacred fish still swim, may have been part of an ancient temple complex. Fragments of mosaics show Dionysian revelries beside scenes of Assyrian hunts, and somewhere beneath the asphalt the lost tombs wait, their stories half told, a metaphor for a city that refused to be just one thing, even as history tried to pin it down. At the easternmost edge of the Hellenistic world, where the Oxus River carved through the stark landscapes of modern Afghanistan, stood Ai-Khanoum, a city so Greek in its bones that archaeologists initially dubbed it the Alexandria on the Oxus. Founded by one of Alexander's generals around 300 BC, this wasn't just a military outpost clinging to the fringe of civilization. It was a full-blown Greek polis transplanted onto Central Asian soil, complete with a grand gymnasium, a theater seating 6,000, and Corinthian columns that rose defiantly against the backdrop of the Hindu Kush. What made Ai-Khanoum extraordinary wasn't just its Greek facade but the cultural cocktail brewing beneath. Step inside its palace complex and you'd find clay tablets scribbled in Greek alongside ledgers written in Bactrian. The city's temples housed statues of Zeus and Apollo, but local artisans reimagined them with almond-shaped eyes and draped them in garments eerily reminiscent of Buddhist iconography. One particularly haunting discovery, a stone foot likely from a colossal statue bearing the delicate folds of a Greek chiton, but positioned in the meditative pose of a Buddha. This wasn't cultural appropriation, it was alchemy, a silent dialogue between worlds separated by thousands of miles. The city thrived as a trade nexus, funneling gold from Siberia, lapis lazuli from Badakhshan, and spices from India toward Mediterranean markets. Its streets hummed with the chatter of Sogdian horse traders haggling with Greek merchants, while philosophers debated Aristotelian logic in shaded porticos. But Ai-Khanoum's greatest treasure might be its gymnasium, a near-perfect replica of those in Athens, complete with inscriptions exhorting young men to honor the gods and train both body and mind. For a fleeting moment, this was Greece at the edge of the known world, a beacon of Hellenism glowing against the steppes' vast emptiness. Then, around 145 BC, something shattered the dream. The city was abandoned with eerie haste. Coins lay scattered in workshops, jars of grain sat untouched in storerooms. No fire, no siege, just silence. Theories whirl like desert winds. Did nomadic Yuezhi horsemen sweep through? Did a shift in trade routes starve its economy? Or was it internal collapse, a Greek elite too isolated to sustain its hybrid experiment? The ruins offer cryptic clues. Broken arrowheads in the streets suggest violence, yet there's no mass grave to confirm slaughter. The palace's treasury was looted, but by whom? Even the river might share blame. Archaeologists note how the Oxus gradually shifted course, possibly choking the irrigation canals that fed Ai-Khanoum's fields. Today, the site lies eerily intact, its column drums toppled like dominoes, its altars stripped of idols. The most poignant relic, a papyrus scrap quoting Delphi's famous maxims, "Know thyself." It urges words meant for Greeks, found in a land where Greece became something else entirely. Ai-Khanoum didn't just die, it vanished mid-conversation, leaving us to wonder what other fusions might have blossomed had history spared this borderland Athens. Straddling the Euphrates like a sentinel between east and west, Zeugma wasn't just a city, it was a lifeline. The name itself means bridge in Greek, and that's exactly what this strategic marvel was, a vital crossing point where empires, armies, and merchants converged. Founded by Seleucus I around 300 BC, Zeugma's location was no accident. Here, the Euphrates narrowed enough to ford, making it the perfect chokehold for controlling trade routes from Mesopotamia to the Mediterranean. Picture a bustling river port where Persian silk met Greek olive oil, where Roman soldiers marched alongside caravans of Armenian silver. The city thrived on this exchange, growing so wealthy that its villas bored floors not of plain stone, but of breathtaking mosaics that still dazzle archaeologists today. One villa alone yielded the famous Gypsy Girl mosaic, a hauntingly lifelike portrait of a woman with eyes that seem to follow you across centuries, but she's just one star in a constellation of artistry. Walk through Zeugma's ruins and you'd find Dionysus reclining on a tiger, surrounded by vines of gold tessera, or Achilles disguised in women's robes on Skyros, his muscles taut beneath the delicate folds of fabric. These weren't just decorations, they were statements, a way for Zeugma's elite to flaunt their sophistication, blending Greek myths with Near Eastern flair. The colors alone, deep lapis blues, fiery reds pulled from local clays, hinted at a city drunk on luxury and cosmopolitan pride. Yet Zeugma's fate was sealed by the very river that nourished it. In 256 AD, the Sasanian king Shapur I launched a devastating invasion, his armies slicing through Roman defenses like a blade through silk. The city's bridges burned, its villas were looted, and those exquisite mosaics, some still bearing scorch marks, were buried under collapsing walls. The Euphrates, once Zeugma's lifeblood, became its shroud. Rising waters from modern dams now lap at the edges of the ruins, swallowing whole neighborhoods that archaeologists raced to save in the 1990s. What remains today is a paradox. Salvaged mosaics glow under museum lights, while the river that doomed Zeugma quietly erases its bones. But perhaps that's fitting for a city that existed between worlds, a place where East met West on a bridge of artistry and ambition, until history decided to burn it down. Tucked away in the rugged highlands of northern Syria, Cyrrhus was the Seleucid Empire's unsung sentinel, a city built for war, yet softened by art. Unlike the glittering ports or sprawling trade hubs, this place had a singular purpose: to stand guard. Perched on a strategic plateau overlooking the Euphrates Valley, its walls weren't just defensive, they were psychological warfare. Imagine approaching from the east, seeing those massive limestone ramparts glowing amber in the sunset, knowing they housed garrisons of Greek archers and local mercenaries trained to rain death on invaders. The Seleucids didn't just build Cyrrhus, they engineered it to intimidate. But here's the twist: beyond its martial muscle, Cyrrhus hid a cultural gem. Carved into the hillside, its theater is one of the best preserved in the ancient world. Its semicircular rows of seats so intact you could almost hear echoes of Sophocles' tragedies bouncing off the stone. This wasn't some crude army camp amusement. The acoustics are precision-tuned, the sightlines flawless, with a stage that once hosted traveling troops from Antioch and local performers re-energizing Mesopotamian epics. How fitting that a city meant to project power also perfected the art of storytelling, its soldiers by day becoming its audience by night. Cyrrhus thrived as a choke point, taxing caravans moving between Anatolia and Mesopotamia. Its mint churned out coins stamped with the head of Apollo, but also with cryptic Aramaic symbols, a nod to the diverse peoples who called it home, yet remoteness became its undoing. As Seleucid control frayed, the city's importance hinged on empire-wide trade networks. When those routes shifted south under Roman rule, Cyrrhus slowly bled out. No dramatic siege, no natural disaster, just a quiet withering. Farmers repurposed its stones for terraces, shepherds penned goats in the theater's orchestra pit. Today, the ruins stand eerily alone, visited mostly by wind and the occasional archaeologist. The city that once commanded fear is now a masterclass in preservation, its theater still hosting performances not of actors but of swallows darting through its arches at dusk. There's poetry in that, a place built to dominate now humbled, yet enduring precisely because it was forgotten. Cyrrhus didn't just fade, it became a time capsule, waiting for the world to remember its dual legacy, where the clash of swords once harmonized with the chorus of plays. In the heart of Syria, where the Euphrates carved its path through sun-scorched plains, rose Hierapolis Bambyce, a city that pulsed with divine fervor. This wasn't just another temple town. It was the beating heart of a cult so intoxicating that even Roman historians whispered about its mysteries. At its center stood the sanctuary of Atargates, the fish goddess whose worship blended Syrian fertility rites with Hellenistic grandeur. Pilgrims trekked across deserts to glimpse her idol, said to be draped in pearls and flanked by golden doves, its very presence radiating an otherworldly aura. The rituals here defied Greek sensibilities. Every spring, throngs of devotees plunged into sacred pools teeming with holy fish creatures so revered that harming one was punishable by death. Witnesses wrote of priests in billowing robes performing ecstatic dances, their bodies painted with symbols of the goddess, while temple prostitutes, both men and women, offered themselves as living bridges between mortals and the divine. The air hung thick with the scent of burnt offerings and myrrh, and at night the glow of countless oil lamps transformed the temple complex into a constellation of earthly stars. But Hierapolis's spiritual might couldn't shield it from earthly powers. When Roman legions under Pompey stormed Syria in the 1st century BC, they paused at the city's gates, not out of fear but fascination. The conquerors looted the temple's gold yet left the cult intact, shrewdly recognizing that some mysteries were better co-opted than crushed. For centuries, Roman emperors sent gifts to Atargates, their coins bearing her image beside Jupiter's. Even the rise of Christianity couldn't erase her entirely. Local converts simply rebranded her as Saint Thecla, preserving ancient rites under new names. Time, however, proved less forgiving. Earthquakes rattled the temple's foundations and shifting trade routes drained the city's wealth. By the 7th century AD, the pools lay stagnant, the fish vanished. Today, only scattered column drums and the odd carving of a dove hint at the frenzy that once ruled here. The most poignant relic, a weathered stone basin where pilgrims once bathed, its rim carved with waves, a silent echo of the goddess who ruled water, love, and oblivion, only to be swallowed by the very current she commanded. Jebel Khalid clung to a barren bluff above the Euphrates like a sentry frozen in time, a Hellenistic time capsule so perfectly preserved that archaeologists found intact wall paintings still clinging to its mud-brick houses. This wasn't just another military colony, it was a slice of Greece transplanted onto Syrian soil, complete with Doric columns and a sprawling governor's palace that wouldn't have looked out of place in Macedonia. Founded around 300 BC as a strategic bulwark against nomadic raids, the city's layout reveals its dual nature: rigid military precision in the barracks district, yet sudden flourishes of domestic comfort in villas with courtyards shaded by grapevines. What makes Jebel Khalid extraordinary isn't just its preservation, but the snapshot it offers of everyday life on the empire's edge. Excavators uncovered wine amphorae from roads still sealed with their original clay stoppers, loom weights scattered where weavers abandoned them, even charred bread in a kitchen hearth, as if the occupants merely stepped out for a moment. The military presence loomed large, arrowheads littered the armory, and clay tablets recorded troop movements in crisp Greek script, yet this was no Spartan outpost. The discovery of delicate gold earrings and imported perfumes suggests officers' families brought Mediterranean tastes with them to this windswept frontier. Then came the enigma. Around 140 BC, Jebel Khalid emptied with unsettling suddenness. No signs of violence, no sacked buildings, just orderly abandonment. Household items were carefully stored, doors were barred from the outside. It's as if the entire garrison received marching orders on the same day. Some scholars point to the Seleucid Empire's collapse in the region, suggesting troops were recalled to defend core territories. Others wonder if the Euphrates shifted course, choking the city's water supply. But the most tantalizing clue, a single coin minted under King Antiochus VIII, found beneath a threshold, its date aligning eerily with the city's final moments. Today, Jebel Khalid's ruins whisper secrets to those who listen. The governor's palace still commands views across the Syrian steppe, its reception hall's geometric floor mosaics astonishingly vibrant. In the necropolis, tomb paintings show Greek soldiers sharing feasts with local dignitaries, their goblets raised in frozen camaraderie. This wasn't just a military installation, it was a cultural experiment, one that ended not with a bang, but with the quiet click of a locked gate echoing across 2,000 years of silence. Nisibis stood at the crossroads of empires like a chess piece forever trapped between rival kings. A city so fiercely contested that it changed hands 13 times in just 4 centuries. Perched on the edge of Mesopotamia's fertile plains, this wasn't just a strategic stronghold. It was a battleground where Hellenistic dreams crumbled under the boots of Roman legions and Persian cataphracts. Yet amid the sieges and shifting borders, Nisibis harbored a startling secret. One of the ancient world's most influential universities, where Greek logic sparred with Syriac theology under the same roof. The city's heyday arrived under Seleucid rule, its streets lined with colonnades and its agora buzzing with debates in half a dozen languages. But it was the school of Nisibis that became legendary, a beacon of learning so renowned that scholars traveled from as far as Armenia and Edessa to study within its halls. Here, professors dissected Aristotle's texts while scribes translated medical treatises from Greek into Syriac, preserving knowledge that would later fuel the Islamic Golden Age. The campus thrived as a microcosm of the Seleucid ideal, a place where geometry and Zoroastrian cosmology coexisted, where a lecture on Platonic forms might be interrupted by the distant rumble of approaching armies. War, however, was Nisibis's constant shadow. The Romans saw the city as a dagger pointed at Persia's heart, while the Parthians viewed it as the western key to Mesopotamia. In 194 AD, Emperor Septimius Severus stormed its gates, only to lose it again decades later. The cycle repeated for generations, each conquest erasing another layer of Hellenistic identity. Persian Shahs tore down Greek temples to erect fire altars. Roman emperors retaliated by smashing those altars and raising statues of Jupiter. The university, remarkably, endured even as the city's soul fractured, its scholars teaching by candlelight while siege engines groaned beyond the walls. The final blow came in 363 AD. After a brutal Persian siege, Rome surrendered Nisibis in a humiliating treaty. Overnight, its Greek-speaking elite fled westward, and Zoroastrian priests purged the university's libraries. Yet in a twist of irony, the school of Nisibis didn't die, it migrated. Its exiled scholars regrouped in Edessa, carrying with them scrolls that would seed Christian intellectual traditions for centuries. Today, the ruins of ancient Nisibis lie buried beneath modern Turkey's Nusaybin, its once great campus reduced to scattered mosaic fragments. But walk its dusty outskirts and you might still sense the ghosts of debates that refused to be silenced, even as empires tried to rewrite the city's story with fire and sword. At the mouth of the Tigris, where the river once kissed the Persian Gulf, Charax Spasinu thrived as the Seleucid Empire's gateway to the riches of the Indian Ocean. Founded by Alexander the Great's Admiral Nearchus and later rebuilt by Antiochus IV, this wasn't just a port, it was an engineering marvel. Picture a city perched on artificial mounds, its canals dredged deep enough to welcome towering merchant ships from India, their hulls crammed with spices, pearls, and exotic woods. Warehouses stacked with frankincense and silk lined the waterfront, while Greek merchants haggled over prices with Tamil traders under the shade of date palms. The city's very existence defied geography, a testament to human ingenuity in taming the watery chaos of the delta. But Charax's greatest strength hid its fatal flaw. The same rivers that fed its trade also carried mountains of silt downstream, slowly choking the life from its harbors. Engineers fought back with dredging campaigns, an ancient version of holding back the tide with buckets, but nature always won. By the 2nd century AD, the shoreline had crept so far south that ships could no longer reach the docks. What was once a bustling port became a mosquito-infested backwater, its grandeur sinking into the mud. The final insult, the Tigris shifted its course entirely, leaving Charax stranded inland like a beached whale. Archaeologists sifting through the soggy ruins found poignant relics of this decline. A ship's anchor buried in what's now a wheat field, a warehouse ledger still legible after 2 millennia, its final entries recording dwindling cargoes. Even the city's name became ironic. Charax means palisade in Greek, yet its mighty walls now guard nothing but silence. Today, the site lies near modern Basra, its memory preserved only in fragmented texts and the stubborn whispers of traders who still speak of a lost emporium that once connected worlds until the rivers rewrote the map. Not to be confused with its more famous namesake Dura-Europos, the lesser-known Europos Daura was a marvel of survival in the harsh Syrian steppe, a city that turned the desert green through sheer human ingenuity. While its sister city thrived on cultural exchange and military strategy, Europos Daura owed its prosperity to something far more fundamental: water. The city's engineers devised an irrigation network so advanced that archaeologists still marvel at its precision. Canals branched like veins from the Euphrates, feeding vast fields of wheat, barley, and sesame, while underground qanats tapped hidden aquifers to nourish vineyards that produced wine so fine it reached royal tables in Antioch. Walk through Europos Daura at its peak, and you'd see a patchwork of lush orchards where dates and figs drenched in sunlight, their roots drinking from carefully calibrated ditches. The city's wealth was measured not in gold but in harvests. Grain stores towered over its skyline, and clay tablets record shipments large enough to feed entire provinces. This wasn't just farming, it was high-stakes alchemy, transforming sand into sustenance. But the system had a fragility invisible to the naked eye. Every canal, every qanat relied on meticulous maintenance by a workforce trained over generations. Then came the cracks in the foundation, literally. Prolonged droughts in the 2nd century, a D lowered the Euphrates, starving the canals. The water table sank beyond the reach of qanats, and slowly the fields began to wither. As harvests dwindled, so did the city's ability to pay the desert tribes who'd long served as its protectors. Raids began as trickles, a stolen crop here, a sabotaged sluice gate there, then became floods. By the time Roman historians noted Europos' Daura's decline, it was already a hollow shell, its granaries emptied, its once bustling markets picked clean by scavengers. Today, the ruins tell a silent story of resilience and ruin. The skeleton of a water wheel lies half buried in cracked earth, its wooden paddles long since crumbled. A mosaic in the governor's villa, miraculously preserved, shows a scene of abundance, ripe grapes, overflowing grain baskets, a mocking contrast to the barren landscape surrounding it. Europos' Daura didn't fall to an empire's army or a natural disaster, but to something slower and more insidious, the unrelenting arithmetic of drought and human vulnerability. Its legacy lingers in the fragments of clay irrigation seals stamped with Greek letters, each one a testament to the delicate balance between civilization and the elements it tries, and sometimes fails, to master. Deep in the mountains of southern Iran, where the scent of salt from the Persian Gulf mingled with desert winds, Antioch in Persis stood as a defiant outpost of Hellenism, a city few remember but whose influence rippled across empires. Unlike its flashier namesake on the Orontes, this Antioch wasn't built for luxury. It was a cultural bridgehead planted by Antiochus I to project Seleucid power into the heart of ancient Persia. Imagine a city where Greek stucco facades rose beside ziggurat-inspired terraces, where the gymnasium's wrestling matches drew crowds alongside fire rituals honoring Ahura Mazda. The archaeologists who uncovered its ruins were stunned to find Corinthian capitals adorned with Persian lotus motifs, stone testaments to a place that refused to choose between worlds. This was no accident. The city's very layout whispered of calculated fusion. Its central agora stretched wide enough for camel caravans from India, yet its temples held statues of Apollo wearing the tiara of a Persian satrap. Local artisans trained in Greek techniques sculpted deities with distinctly Iranian features, a bearded Zeus who could pass for Mithras, or an Athena whose aegis bore Elamite symbols. Even the pottery tells a story of cultural cross-pollination. Wine amphorae stamped with Greek letters but painted in vibrant Persepolis-style geometric patterns. Antioch in Persis wasn't just a colonial outpost. It was a laboratory where Hellenistic and Persian traditions conducted a silent, centuries-long dialogue. But geopolitics had other plans. As Parthian horsemen swept westward in the 2nd century BC, the city found itself stranded, a Greek island in a rising Iranian tide. The decisive break came when the Parthian king Mithridates I severed the Silk Road routes linking Antioch to Seleucia, choking its economic lifeline. Overnight, Greek merchants became exiles or adopted Parthian garb. The gymnasium's palaestra fell silent, yet in a twist of irony, the Parthians didn't erase Hellenism, they repurposed it. The very hybrid art that once proclaimed Seleucid dominance now served new masters, with Parthian nobles commissioning portraits of themselves in Alexander-style armor, while quietly reinstating Zoroastrian priests to power. Today, the ruins near modern Bushire reveal layers of this metamorphosis. Excavators found a theater where Greek tragedies were staged, then later adapted with Persian epics, its stone seats worn smooth by audiences of shifting loyalties. The most haunting discovery, a stash of clay tablets in a scriptorium, some bearing Greek tax records abruptly ending mid-sentence, others overwritten in Parthian cuneiform. These weren't just administrative documents, they were obituaries for a city's identity. Antioch in persist didn't so much fall as dissolve, its Hellenistic soul diluted drop by drop until only the architecture remained, a Greek facade on a Persian frame, waiting for archaeologists to read between the lines. Seleucia on the Iulius burst onto the scene with all the subtlety of a Macedonian war trumpet, a city crafted to overshadow Susa, the ancient Elamite capital that had dominated the Persian plateau for millennia. Founded by Antiochus I around 280 BC, this wasn't just urban planning, it was a power play in stone and mortar. Picture a metropolis rising along the banks of the Iulius River, its grid of streets laid with mathematical precision, its temples gleaming with imported marble, all designed to scream one message: the Seleucids were here to stay. The king even transplanted Greek settlers from Magnesia to populate it, ensuring its culture would be unmistakably Hellenistic, but Seleucia's true ambition lay in its symbolism. Built almost within sight of Susa's ziggurats, it was a deliberate challenge to Elamite memory, a statement that the new empire could outshine the old. Its grand boulevards mimicked Antioch's, while its temples fused Greek deities with local gods in a calculated nod to Persian sensibilities. Archaeologists have unearthed tablets showing scribes painstakingly translating Greek administrative terms into Elamite, a bureaucratic olive branch to the conquered populace. For a fleeting moment it worked. The city thrived as a regional capital, its markets buzzing with Babylonian textiles, Syrian glass, and Indian spices. Then came the unraveling, swift, brutal, and oddly mysterious. By the mid-2nd century BC, Seleucia on the Iulius was already fading, its decline so abrupt that historians still debate the culprit. Was it the Parthian conquests that severed its trade links, or the river's unpredictable floods which may have drowned its farmland in silt? The ruins offer cryptic clues. Excavations reveal half-finished buildings abandoned mid-construction, their columns lying like fallen dominoes. A cache of coins minted under Antiochus IV was found buried beneath a collapsed wall, as if someone hid their savings before fleeing. Even more haunting are the clay seals from the city's archives, some stamped with Greek names, others with Elamite left scattered where they fell, their bureaucratic purpose abruptly irrelevant. Today, the site near modern Shush tempts archaeologists with its paradoxes. Why did a city built to last crumble so fast? Why are its most elaborate mosaics found not in palaces but in modest merchant homes? And what to make of the lone Doric capital discovered miles downstream, carried by floodwaters centuries ago? Seleucia on the Iulius never quite replaced Susa, but its ghost lingers in these fragments, a dream of Hellenistic grandeur swallowed by the very landscape it sought to conquer. Chalcis ad Bellum clung to the banks of the Belus River like a gambler refusing to leave a fading game, a city whose fortunes rose and fell with the empires that coveted its one irresistible asset, the largest stone bridge in Syria. Built by Seleucid engineers around 200 BC, this wasn't just a crossing, it was a masterpiece of leverage. Picture a structure wide enough for 2 chariots to pass abreast, its arches defying the river's fiercest floods, connecting the fertile plains of northern Syria to the desert trade routes beyond. The Seleucids' new control meant movement, and Chalcis became the empire's linchpin, taxing every camel caravan, every troop movement that rumbled across its spans. But bridges, like empires, only last as long as someone maintains them. When Rome swallowed Syria in the 1st century BC, Chalcis underwent a subtle metamorphosis. Gone were the Greek magistrates in their himatians. In their place, Latin-speaking colonists in togas transformed the agora into a forum. the city's Seleucid-era temples were retrofitted statues of Zeus recarved with Jupiter's stern brow, local deities rebranded with Roman names. Yet the bridge endured, now stamped with the SPQR seal, its stones bearing the scrapes of countless legionary boots. For a time, Chalcis thrived as a hybrid, its market selling Babylonian dates alongside Gallic wine, its children answering to both Greek and Latin names. Then came the silence. As Rome's focus shifted to the Euphrates frontier, Chalcis's strategic value withered. New roads bypassed its iconic bridge. Merchants favored Antioch's deeper harbors. By the 3rd century AD, the once bustling river port had dwindled to a garrison town. Its bridge, once the pride of engineers, now mostly used by shepherds guiding flocks to pasture. The final insult, a Persian raid in 256 AD, left the bridge's northern span in ruins, and no one bothered to rebuild it. Today, the remnants of Chalcis ad Bellum whisper of these layered identities. The bridge's remaining arches still jut defiantly from the riverbanks, their stones pocked with weather and time. Excavators found a hoard of coins beneath its approaches, Seleucid drachmas mingled with Roman denarii, as if someone dropped their purse while fleeing. Most poignant are the graffiti, Greek prayers to Hermes etched beside crude Latin curses, a testament to the generations who passed this way, each leaving their mark before fading into history's current. Chalcis didn't just decline, it became a lesson in how infrastructure, no matter how brilliant, is only as vital as the world that needs it. Ichni lingers in history like a half-erased name on an ancient tablet. They're just enough to tease us with its existence, but vanishing before we can grasp its full story. Unlike the grand metropolises of Seleucia or Antioch, this Mesopotamian settlement left behind no towering ruins or glittering mosaics. Instead, its traces are whispers, a line in a Babylonian chronicle, a handful of coins stamped with Greek letters and strange local symbols, the stubborn foundations of walls peeking through Iraq's sun-baked soil. Yet these fragments hint at a city that may have played a quiet but crucial role in the early Seleucid machine, an administrative cog in the vast imperial system. The clues begin with geography. Located near modern-day Kirkuk, Ichni sat astride vital trade routes linking Babylon to the northern Tigris valleys. Seleucid tax records recovered from nearby Dura-Europos mention shipments of grain and bitumen passing through Ichnia, suggesting it functioned as a way station for imperial logistics. More telling are those enigmatic coins, crude compared to royal mints, yet bearing the name Antiochus alongside an unidentified local deity. This wasn't just loose change, it was evidence of a hybrid economy where Greek bureaucracy met Mesopotamian traditions. One particularly worn coin shows Heracles' club awkwardly grafted onto a figure that might be the Babylonian god Nergal, as if the engraver wasn't quite sure how to blend the two worlds. Then there's the curious case of the Ichnian lists. Discovered in the 1950s among cuneiform tablets in Seleucia, these clay fragments detail shipments of reed pens, clay seals, and wax tablets, the tools of imperial record-keeping, dispatched to small regional centers. Ichni appears repeatedly as a destination, hinting it may have housed a minor administrative outpost processing everything from troop movements to harvest taxes. The real puzzle, the lists abruptly stop around 240 BC, around the same time the city fades from all other records. No fire, no conquest, just silence. Archaeologists piecing together this vanishing act point to the shifting sands of Seleucid politics. As the Parthians began nibbling at Mesopotamia's edges, the empire likely consolidated its resources into larger, more defensible hubs. A minor node like Ichni, lacking walls or strategic depth, would have been expendable, but there's another, eerier possibility. Core samples from the site show layers of unusually fine silt, evidence the nearby Little Zab River may have dramatically changed course, drowning farmland and choking trade routes in sediment. Nature, not war, could have erased Ichni twice over, first from the landscape, then from memory. Today, the site remains stubbornly elusive. Satellite imagery reveals geometric shadows under farmland, ghostly outlines of streets or canals. Local farmers still turn up strange pottery shards, Greek black glaze ware on one side, rough local red clay on the other. The most haunting find, a single-fired brick stamped with a partial inscription in both Greek and Aramaic, its broken edges leaving the message forever unfinished. Ai-Khanoum didn't just disappear, it became a palindrome of history present and absent in the same breath, its greatest legacy being how thoroughly it was forgotten. Yet in that forgetting lies a lesson. Sometimes the smallest cities leave the loudest echoes precisely because we must strain to hear them. Amphipolis in Syria presents historians with a delightful puzzle, a city that borrowed its name from a Macedonian powerhouse, yet carved out a destiny all its own. Unlike its famous counterpart along the Strymon River, this lesser-known sibling wasn't just a colonial afterthought. It occupied a sliver of land where the Orontes River curved sharply westward, a choke point controlling access between the Syrian interior and the Mediterranean coast. The Seleucids didn't choose this spot by accident. Picture a fortress city watching over the valley, its walls bristling with archers, while below, caravans laden with Lebanese cedar and Anatolian silver snaked through the pass under the watchful eyes of tax collectors. But names can be deceptive. While the original Amphipolis boasted theaters and gold mines, its Syrian counterpart thrived on something far more volatile: geopolitics. Excavations reveal a city designed for perpetual readiness, barracks tucked behind agora colonnades, granaries built like blockhouses. Even its coins told a story of borrowed identity, minted with the same Macedonian starburst symbol as the homeland version, but stamped with Aramaic letters whispering of local alliances. This wasn't mere imitation, it was tactical branding, a way to project continuity in a fractured landscape. Then came the Earth's betrayal. Core samples taken from the site tell of at least 3 catastrophic earthquakes between the 1st century BC and the 4th century AD, each one burying layers of ambition under rubble. The worst struck in 115 AD, when a temblor split the city's aqueduct like a twig, sending torrents of water gushing through streets already heaving from the upheaval. Archaeologists found skeletons crouched in doorways, their arms raised in futile protection, while storehouses full of grain jars lay crushed beneath toppled columns. The Seleucids had built Amphipolis to withstand siege engines, but no engineer could armor a city against the ground itself opening its jaws. What's most haunting, though, isn't the destruction, it's the adaptation. After each quake, survivors didn't just rebuild, they reimagined. Later strata show Roman-era engineers abandoning Greek-style ashlar masonry in favor of flexible brick arches, while the agora shrank to make room for emergency cisterns. By the time the Arabs arrived in the 7th century, they found a ghost of a city, its original name half remembered, its strategic purpose long since rerouted by new trade roads. Today, the ruins near modern Hama hide under olive groves, their most eloquent artifacts being the warped door frames and tilted staircases frozen mid-collapse as if time paused mid-disaster. Amphipolis in Syria didn't just fade, it became a lesson in how even the best-laid plans can fracture when the earth decides to rewrite them. Larissa in Syria defied the usual fate of Hellenistic cities not by resisting change but by bending with it. Named after the Thessalian homeland of its Seleucid founders, this city began as another colonial outpost, its grid of streets and Doric temples proclaiming Greek order in the heart of northern Syria. But unlike its flashier counterparts, Larissa didn't cling stubbornly to its past. Instead, it became a masterclass in adaptation, evolving through Roman occupation and Arab conquest with a quiet resilience that left archaeologists stunned. Walk through Larissa during its Seleucid heyday, and you'd see all the expected trappings. A gymnasium where young men trained in the palestra, a theater staging Euripides under the stars, even a modest agora where olive oil from the Aegean was traded for local wool. But dig deeper and the quirks emerge. The city's coins, for instance, minted under Antiochus IV, carried an odd fusion, the face of Apollo on one side, but on the reverse, a local fertility goddess holding sheaves of wheat, her name rendered in both Greek and Aramaic. This wasn't just tolerance, it was a shrewd survival tactic, a way for a small city to court both imperial favor and regional loyalty. Then came the Romans. While other Hellenistic centers crumbled under the weight of Latin rule, Larissa pivoted seamlessly. Its temples were rededicated, Zeus became Jupiter, Artemis morphed into Diana, but the rituals inside often retained their Greek-inflected rhythms. Excavators found a 2nd century AD altar inscribed to Theos Hypsistos, a deliberately vague term that could mean highest god to a Roman, yet echo local Syrian sun worship. Even the city's layout shifted subtly. The once rigid Greek grid gave way to Roman-style insulae, yet the old gymnasium stayed open, its mosaics now depicting both Greek athletic heroes and gladiatorial bouts. The real surprise, though, came with the Arab conquest. While neighboring cities were abandoned or repurposed, Larissa's streets remained bustling. Its Byzantine-era churches weren't razed but quietly converted, their frescoes of saints plastered over with geometric designs that still hinted at the figures beneath. A 7th century Arabic chronicle mentions Al-Larissa as a thriving market town, its Hellenistic water system still feeding public baths now used for Muslim purification rituals. The most telling artifact, a scrap of papyrus found in the 1990s, a merchant's contract written in Greek, Aramaic, and early Arabic, all on the same page, as if the city's very paperwork refused to pick sides. Today, the ruins near modern Shazar whisper of this chameleon-like endurance. The skeleton of a Roman triumphal arch stands just meters from an Umayyad-era caravanserai, their stones sharing the same warm hue. In the old agora, a Byzantine column capital has been repurposed as a millstone, its cross-shaped motifs worn smooth by generations of grinding grain. Larissa didn't just survive, it folded time into itself, becoming less a city than a living palimpsest, one where every conqueror left their mark, but none fully erased what came before. Its legacy isn't in grand monuments, but in the quiet tenacity of everyday life, proving that sometimes the surest way to endure is to never stop changing. Arethusa stood as a liquid jewel in the arid Syrian landscape, a city where water didn't just flow, it danced. Built around a series of natural springs that gushed from limestone cliffs, its very name whispered of aquatic grace, borrowed from the mythical nymph who transformed into a fountain to escape pursuit. The Seleucid engineers who shaped Arethusa didn't just harness these waters, they turned them into a spectacle. Picture terraced gardens cascading down hillsides, nourished by aqueducts that split the springs into 1,000 glittering threads. Public fountains boasted bronze statues of river gods, their mouths spouting arcs of water synchronized to mark the hours, while underground cisterns, cool and cavernous, stored enough to withstand sieges. This wasn't just infrastructure, it was liquid poetry, a testament to human ingenuity bending nature to its will. But water wasn't just Arethusa's lifeblood, it became its downfall. When Pompey's legions stormed Syria in 64 BC, carving up the remnants of the Seleucid Empire, most cities bowed to Rome's inevitability, not Arethusa. Its citizens, led by a defiant nobleman named Sampsiceramus, turned the very waterways that sustained them into weapons. They dammed the springs, flooding approach roads and leaving Roman siege engines mired in mud. When Pompey's cavalry finally breached the gates, they found streets barricaded with overturned statues of Greek water deities, their hollow bodies now packed with rubble. The resistance was fierce, creative, and ultimately doomed. Rome's retribution was methodical. Pompey ordered the springs diverted, their channels smashed. The gardens withered within weeks. Survivors spoke of soldiers tossing sacred fish from the temple pools onto baking stones, while the great fountain statues were melted down for catapult ammunition, a grim parody of the city's liquid soul. By the time Augustus assumed power, Arethusa was already a ghost town, its once lush terraces eroded into gullies. Archaeologists sifting through the ruins near modern Al-Rastan found eerie echoes of this tragedy. A child's leather sandal preserved in the mud of a drained reservoir, a mosaic of the nymph Arethusa half-scorched by fire, her face blurred as if melting back into the earth. The cruelest irony, the springs still flow today, untapped and largely forgotten, their waters trickling past the skeletal remains of a city that dared to defy an empire and paid the price in thirst and silence. Gindaris clung to its rocky perch like a hawk eyeing the plains below, a fortress designed not for beauty but for pure, unrelenting function. This was the Seleucid Empire's armored fist in northern Syria, a hilltop stronghold where every stone served a singular purpose: war. Built atop a steep ridge near modern-day Gindaris, the city's walls followed the natural contours of the terrain, turning cliffs into impenetrable barriers and narrow passes into deadly funnels. From its battlements, sentries could spot dust clouds from approaching armies miles away, while its cisterns, carved deep into the bedrock, ensured defenders could outlast any siege. Gindaris wasn't just a military base, it was a psychological weapon, its very silhouette on the horizon a warning to rivals. But the city's strength was also its limitation. Unlike the cosmopolitan hubs of Antioch or Seleucia, Gindaris thrived on austerity. Excavations revealed barracks instead of theaters, armories rather than marketplaces. Even its few civilian homes were built like miniature forts with thick walls and high windows. This wasn't a place for philosophers or merchants. It was a garrison town where every resident, from blacksmiths to bakers, served the war machine. The artifacts tell the story: bronze arrowheads by the thousands, fragments of ballistic bolts, and a stunning hoard of silver tetradrachms stamped with the faces of Seleucid kings, likely pay for mercenaries who guarded the frontier. Then came the shift that rendered Gindaris obsolete. By the 1st century BC, warfare had transformed. Rome's legions, with their disciplined siege engines and road networks, no longer feared isolated strongholds. They simply bypassed them, cutting supply lines until starvation did their work. The Parthians, meanwhile, relied on horse archers who could strike and vanish before Gindaris's heavy infantry even formed ranks. The fortress, once unassailable, became a relic, a chess piece in a game that had changed the rules. The end came not with a battle, but with neglect. As the Seleucid Empire crumbled, Gindaris's garrison dwindled. Roofs collapsed in abandoned barracks, weeds cracked the parade grounds. By the time Roman surveyors catalogued the region, they barely noted the site, dismissing it as Castra Vetus, the old camp. Today, the ruins brood over the Syrian countryside, their stones repurposed by farmers for terraces. The most poignant find, a child's toy sword, carved from olive wood and left in the dust, a bittersweet relic of a city that lived by the sword and died by the changing tides of war. Demetrius in Assyria haunts historians like a riddle wrapped in shifting sands, a city whose very existence is confirmed by ancient texts, yet whose location remains stubbornly elusive. Founded by Demetrius I around 165 BC, this wasn't just another provincial outpost. It was a royal vanity project, a namesake city meant to cement the king's legacy in the contested heartlands of Mesopotamia. Greek chroniclers describe its grand avenues and fortified citadel, while Babylonian tablets mention it as a tax collection hub. But here's the twist: not a single ruin has been definitively matched to its name. Demetrius is less a lost city than a ghost city, its coordinates debated as fiercely as its purpose. The mystery begins with geography. Some scholars pin Demetrius near modern Mosul, where the Tigris narrows, a strategic spot for controlling river trade. Others argue for sites farther south, where Seleucid-era pottery fragments cluster near ancient canals. The most tantalizing clue, a cuneiform ledger from Babylon noting grain shipments to Dimitratu, a name suspiciously close to Demetrius, sent from a river port now buried under 2 millennia of silt. But without an inscription bearing the city's name or a royal seal, these breadcrumbs lead in circles. Archaeologists jokingly call it the Mesopotamian mirage, always shimmering on the horizon of discovery, never quite materializing. Compounding the puzzle is Demetrius's own turbulent reign. Known as the Besieger for his relentless military campaigns, he founded Demetrius during a fleeting moment of stability in his otherwise chaotic rule. Was it meant to rival Seleucia as an administrative capital, or was it a forward base for his wars against the Parthians? The city's lifespan adds to the confusion. If it was abandoned shortly after Demetrius's death, as some historians speculate, it may have left only faint traces, like a footprint in wet clay baked away by the sun. Modern technology has raised hopes without delivering answers. Satellite surveys reveal tantalizing grid-like patterns under farmland near the Tigris, but ground-penetrating radar can't distinguish Seleucid foundations from later Roman or Sasanian rebuilds. Local farmers occasionally uncover strange artifacts, a Hellenistic arrowhead here, a Greek-style column drum there, but these scatter like marbles across the landscape, refusing to coalesce into a clear picture. The most heartbreaking find, a shattered stela bearing partial Greek letters, possibly spelling Deem, before the stone fractures into silence. Perhaps Demetrius's greatest lesson isn't about loss, but about the fragility of historical memory. Cities vanish not just through catastrophe, but through the slow erasure of context, a name misrecorded, a river changing course, a dynasty's records burned by successors. Until some lucky archaeologist stumbles upon a smoking gun, a coin hoard, a royal decree, Demetrius remains a whisper from the past, reminding us how much of history is still buried, waiting for the right shovel to uncover its secrets. Seleucia ad Peramum once commanded the waves like a queen of the Cilician coast, its harbor bristling with ships bearing Egyptian grain, Cypriot copper, and Phoenician purple dye. But this port had an eternal rival lurking just down the shoreline, Tarsus, the bustling hometown of St. Paul, and a city with ambitions as vast as its river delta. Picture these two urban powerhouses locked in a salty feud, each vying to dominate the Mediterranean's eastern trade routes. Seleucia boasted deeper anchorages, a gift from its namesake river, the Pyramus, while Tarsus countered with its labyrinthine network of inland canals connecting it to Anatolia's heartland. The competition wasn't just economic, it was existential. Coins minted in Seleucia showed Poseidon triumphant over waves, while Tarsus retaliated with images of its river god Cydnus cradling merchant vessels like cherished children. Geography, however, is a fickle ally. The Pyramus River, Seleucia's lifeblood, carried more than just trade goods. It hauled mountains of silt from the Taurus highlands, dumping them relentlessly into the harbor. By the 1st century BC, captains complained of sandbars forcing them to unload cargo onto smaller boats just to reach the docks. Meanwhile, Tarsus thrived by engineering a solution, dredging its waterways with convict labor and even redirecting tributaries to flush out sediment. The difference in fates was literally written in the mud. Core samples from Seleucia's harbor show layers of silt alternating with desperate attempts to dig new channels, like a patient bleeding out despite frantic bandaging. Then came the pirates, not the swashbuckling adventurers of legend, but ruthless Cilician sea wolves who smelled weakness. With Rome distracted by civil wars, these raiders turned the coastline into their hunting grounds. Seleucia, its defenses crumbling along with its harbor, became easy prey. Ancient sources describe night raids where torches lit up the shoreline as brigands burned warehouses and dragged off entire populations to slave markets. Tarsus, richer and better fortified, paid tribute to the pirates for protection. A cynical but effective strategy that left its rival exposed, the final insult. When Pompey finally crushed the pirate menace in 67 BC, He rewarded Tarsus with tax exemptions while Seleucia's hollowed-out shell barely warranted a footnote in his victory dispatches. Today, the ruins near modern Silif tell a silent tale of this rivalry's aftermath. The once proud harbor is now a mosquito-infested marsh, its outlines visible only from aerial photographs. Excavators found a single poignant artifact, a lead merchant seal stamped with both Seleucia's trident symbol and Tarsus's bull, as if some enterprising trader tried hedging his bets before the tides of history rendered the choice meaningless. The sea that gave Seleucia ad perimum life ultimately chose its victor, leaving behind a cautionary lesson. In the battle between cities, sometimes the real enemy is the earth itself, shifting beneath your feet without warning or mercy. Antioch in Mygdonia stood where worlds collided not with a crash, but with a slow, deliberate blending that left its mark on every brick and fresco. Nestled in northern Mesopotamia near modern Nusaybin, this lesser-known Antioch wasn't just another colonial outpost. It was a cultural laboratory where Greek, Armenian, and Assyrian traditions simmered together under the Seleucid sun. Picture a city where the aroma of Armenian apricot stew wafted through colonnaded streets, where Assyrian scribes translated Euripides into Aramaic while Armenian cavalry officers swapped stories with Greek philosophers in the agora. This wasn't coexistence, it was alchemy. The city's architecture told the tale best. Excavations revealed a theater where the seating tiers were carved with Greek meander patterns only to be interrupted by Armenian-style sun wheels at the entrances. Temples to Zeus stood shoulder to shoulder with shrines to Aramazed, the chief deity of Armenia, their altars bearing inscriptions in three scripts, Greek, Aramaic, and the distinct angular letters of early Armenian. Even the pottery carried this fusion wine amphorae stamped with Seleucid monarchs' faces were glazed in vibrant Armenian cochineal red, their handles shaped to mimic Assyrian palm motifs. But geography cursed Antioch in Mygdonia with a precarious gift. It sat squarely on the fracture line between empires. When the Seleucid grip weakened in the 2nd century BC, Armenian kings from the north and Parthian lords from the east lunged for control. The city became a pawn in a century-long tug of war, its loyalty shifting as often as the frontier winds. One particularly brutal siege left arrowheads embedded in its walls, Greek, Parthian, and Armenian varieties layered like a grim timeline of conquest. The most haunting relic, a clay tablet from the city archives, its final line abruptly scrawled, "The Armenian troops are at the gates, may the gods remember us." Yet even in turmoil, the city's hybrid soul persisted. When the Roman historian Tacitus passed through in the 1st century AD, he noted how Armenian merchants still traded silk in the shadow of half-ruined Greek temples, their bargaining cries mingling with the chants of Zoroastrian fire priests. The baths, once filled with olive oil for Greek athletes, now steamed with Armenian herbal remedies. By the time the Sasanians finally swallowed the region in the 3rd century, Antioch in Mygdonia had become something no conqueror could fully erase, a living palimpsest of resilience where every layer of invasion simply added another thread to its tapestry. Today, its ruins whisper this legacy in broken column drums and bilingual tombstones, proof that some cities aren't defined by who ruled them, but by how they refused to be unmade. Seleucia Sidera crouched in the Pisidian highlands like a blacksmith's forge forgotten by time, a city whose very name whispered of its iron-rich soil and the industry that once fueled its rise. Sidera, meaning of iron, wasn't just poetic flair, it was a badge of pride. The hills surrounding this Seleucid outpost groaned with hematite deposits so pure that local smelters could produce weapons-grade metal with minimal refining. Walk through its workshops in the 2nd century BC, and you'd hear the ceaseless clang of hammers shaping spearheads, the hiss of quenching blades, the acrid tang of burning charcoal mingling with sweat. This was no backwater, it was an arms factory for empires, supplying everything from Macedonian sarissa tips to Roman legionary nails. Yet iron, for all its strength, couldn't shield Seleucia Sidera from the cruel whims of geography. The city's downfall began with something as mundane as a road, or rather the lack of one. When Rome consolidated its grip on Asia Minor, engineers plotted the Via Sebas to connect prosperous colonies like Antioch and Apamea. The route should have passed through Seleucia's iron district. Instead, it veered sharply north, skirting the city entirely. Why? The answer lies in imperial calculus. Roman planners prioritized speed over resources, opting for flatter terrain that shaved days off travel time. Seleucia's rugged hills, though rich in ore, made for punishing gradients. The decision wasn't personal, just brutally pragmatic. The economic dominoes fell swiftly. Without the Via Sebas traffic, merchants bypassed Seleucia's forges. Legion quartermasters, once steady clients, now bought cheaper Iberian iron shipped via Rome's streamlined ports. Local smiths folded one by one, their furnaces cooling to ash. Archaeologists found poignant evidence of this decline. Half-finished swords abandoned in molds, ledger tablets recording desperate price cuts, even votive offerings to Hephaestus buried beneath workshop floors, last-ditch prayers to the god of metalworking. By the 3rd century AD, the city's grand stoa had become a sheep pen, its columns streaked with soot from campfires rather than forge flames, the cruelest twist. Rome's own hunger for iron ultimately resurrected the region, just too late for Seleucia Sidera. Centuries later, Byzantine engineers rediscovered the Pisidian deposits and tapped them for Constantinople's defenses. But the mines now fed distant cities, their wealth flowing down new roads to places that had long forgotten the name Seleucia. Today, the ruins near modern Atabi offer silent testimony to this paradox. Rust-colored stains still bleed from the soil where slag heaps once towered, and the bones of abandoned smelters jut from the earth like the ribs of some great metal beast. The city didn't just fade, it was outmaneuvered by the very empire it once supplied, a reminder that in the ancient world, even the hardest metals were no match for the soft power of a well-placed highway. Nicephorium clung to the Euphrates like a sentry caught between eras, a city whose fate was written not in stone, but in the shifting strategies of empires. Founded by the Seleucids as a fortified river crossing, its original purpose was brutally simple: control the choke point where trade routes from Mesopotamia met the highways to Anatolia. Picture a walled enclave where Greek soldiers patrolled ramparts overlooking rafts of Armenian timber and Arabian spices bobbing on the current below. The city's layout betrayed its martial DNA. Barracks huddled near the docks, arrow-straight streets designed for rapid troop movements, and a central armory stocked with the distinctive bronze-tipped sarissas that once made Seleucid phalanxes unbeatable. Yet Nicephorium's true genius lay in its adaptability. When Rome absorbed Syria in the 1st century BC, the city underwent a quiet metamorphosis. The Seleucid lion on its coins was replaced by the imperial eagle, its Greek magistrates swapped for Latin-speaking prefects. But the Romans didn't just occupy Nicephorium, they weaponized its geography. Emperor Trajan widened its docks to accommodate troop transports during his Parthian campaigns, while legion engineers reinforced the bridge that gave the city its lifeblood. For a time, it thrived as a hybrid. Greek lingered in market haggling, Latin dominated military dispatches, and Aramaic hummed in the workshops where local smiths forged the very nails that held the empire's boots together. The cracks began with an invisible threat: bureaucratic rot. As Rome's central authority weakened in the 3rd century AD, maintaining distant outposts like Nicephorium became a game of diminishing returns. The bridge, once a marvel of engineering, languished without repairs, its cedar pilings gnawed by river worms until cargoes had to be unloaded midstream. More damningly, warfare itself had changed. The Parthians and their Sasanian successors no longer attacked in predictable formations. They struck like lightning with mobile cavalry, rendering fixed fortifications obsolete. A revealing clue: excavations found late Roman layers where barracks were repurposed as storage pits, soldiers replaced by sacks of grain, as if the empire had quietly conceded the city's military irrelevance. The final insult came from nature itself. The Euphrates, ever capricious, began silting the docks that had fueled Nicephorium's prosperity. Without constant dredging, a luxury Rome could no longer afford. Ships bypassed the city entirely, favoring newer ports downstream. By the time Arab armies surged north in the 7th century, they found a ghost of a fortress, its towers manned by a skeleton crew of local militias. The bridge still stood, but its stones bore the scars of 1,000 retreats, gouges from abandoned ballistae, soot from hasty bonfires, and the faintest trace of Greek graffiti beneath Latin overlays a whisper of the Seleucid vision that first planted this city where the water met the sword. Today, the ruins near modern Raqqa offer a silent epitaph for Nicephorium's twin defeats. The bridge's last surviving arch juts from the river like a broken bone, while the outlines of Roman granaries blur under wheat fields. The most telling artifact, a lone catapult projectile half embedded in a crumbled wall, never fired, never needed, left to gather dust as empires marched past and history moved on. Antioch on the Cyrrhus was a city forever in conversation with the river that bore its name, a dialogue that began with cautious respect and ended in outright surrender. Perched on the banks of the Cyrrhus River in what's now southern Turkey, this Seleucid settlement was a marvel of hydraulic engineering, its streets laced with underground channels and its squares anchored by vast cisterns designed to tame the water's whims. The Seleucid architects who laid its foundations knew the risks. They'd chosen this fertile floodplain precisely for its agricultural bounty, gambling that human ingenuity could outpace nature's fury. For a time it worked. Walk through Antioch in its heyday, and you'd see sluice gates humming with regulated currents, fountains fed by pressurized clay pipes, even public latrines flushed by clever gradients, a symphony of water management that would make Roman engineers nod in approval. But the Cyrrhus was no passive partner. Unlike predictable Mediterranean tides, this river answered to the violent mood swings of the Taurus Mountains. Spring meltwater transformed its gentle flow into a roaring juggernaut, while autumn storms sent landslides of mud and boulders crashing downstream. The city's first major flood came in the 2nd century BC, recorded in a surviving inscription as the year the river climbed the walls. Engineers responded by raising embankments and widening spillways, their repairs visible in archaeological layers where neatly cut ashlar blocks abruptly give way to rougher, hurried masonry. By the Roman era, Antioch's drainage systems were so elaborate they became tourist curiosities. Greek geographer Strabo marveled at channels beneath channels, weaving through its foundations like roots. Then came the calamity that no blueprint could anticipate. In 115 AD, an earthquake upstream triggered a catastrophic landslide, dumping an entire mountainside into the Cyrrhus. The river didn't just flood, it changed course entirely, carving a new path straight through the city's heart. Excavations at the site reveal nightmare scenes, collapsed sewer tunnels packed with silt, forums buried under 3 meters of gravel, and the haunting imprint of a child's sandal preserved in dried mud atop a rooftop, testimony to families fleeing upward as waters rose. The Romans rebuilt, of course, they always did, but each reconstruction came at a cost. Later neighborhoods sit noticeably higher, their temples and baths perched atop artificial mounds like stilts, while original Seleucid levels sank into permanent dampness. The final irony, Antioch's greatest strength became its fatal flaw. Those same drainage systems that once kept the city dry now funneled floodwaters with terrifying efficiency. After the third major inundation in 260 AD, recovery efforts grew half-hearted. By the 4th century, entire districts were abandoned to the river's mercy. The most poignant find, a mosaic floor from a wealthy villa, its intricate hunting scene cracked down the middle by seismic shifts, one half perfectly preserved, the other reduced to a jigsaw puzzle of tesserae. Today, modern excavations near Adana uncover layers of defeat, not the dramatic ruins of war, but the slow-motion collapse of a city that dared to outthink a force of nature. Antioch on the Cyrrhus didn't just fade, it was incrementally erased, its legacy measured in silt strata and the stubborn ghosts of canals that now lie as far from water as they once were beneath it. Seleucia ad Bellum thrived where the earth softened, a city planted like a flag in the rich alluvial plains of northern Syria, where wheat fields stretched to the horizon like an emerald sea. Unlike the rugged fortress cities of the highlands, this Seleucid stronghold drew its power from the soil itself. The Belus River, winding lazily through the landscape, didn't just quench crops, it fueled an agricultural engine that fed armies and filled imperial granaries. Walk through Seleucia at its peak and you'd see something startlingly modern. A meticulously surveyed grid of irrigation canals slicing through the countryside, their gradients calculated with near mathematical precision. Hellenistic engineers had turned subsistence farming into a science here, with clay tablets recording crop rotations and water allocations like some ancient USDA report. Yet beneath this pastoral prosperity lurked a darker calculus. Seleucia ad Bellum wasn't just a breadbasket, it was a chokehold. Whoever controlled these plains could starve rebellious cities into submission or feed invading armies marching toward Antioch. The Seleucid kings knew this all too well. They stationed elite cavalry units here not to fight battles but to burn fields. A single order could turn abundance into ashes, making the land itself a weapon. The city's strategic genius lay in its subtlety. No towering walls or dramatic sieges, just the quiet leverage of full storehouses and empty bellies downstream. Then came the erasure. When Arab forces swept through the region in the 7th century, they didn't level Seleucia, they buried it alive. The conquerors built their new settlement, Kinisrin, directly atop the Hellenistic foundations, repurposing stones from Greek temples for mosque courtyards and melting down bronze statues to cast cooking pots. Over centuries, the Arab city grew like a vine over a ruin, its roots entwining with the bones of its predecessor. Even the river's name shifted. Belus became the Arabic Kawak, a linguistic palimpsest mirroring the physical one below. Archaeologists scratching through these layers face a surreal puzzle. In Kinisrin's medieval suck, a stall selling olives might stand atop a Seleucid tax office's mosaic floor, its tesserae depicting Dionysus peeking through gaps in the cobblestones. A farmer's plow occasionally snags on a Hellenistic water valve, its lead pipe still aligned toward fields now sown with different crops, the most poetic find. A 12th century Arabic irrigation manual quoting verbatim from a Seleucid agricultural treatise, knowledge surviving conquest by hiding in plain sight. Today, the landscape whispers its dual identity. Satellite imagery reveals ghostly crop marks tracing the old Greek canals beneath modern wheat fields, while drought years expose patches of ancient mortar in the riverbanks. Seleucia ad Bellum didn't vanish, it was swallowed whole, its legacy flowing underground like the river that once made it mighty, a reminder that sometimes the deepest history isn't found in ruins but in the living world built atop them. Ai-Khanoum crouched in the dusty plains of western Afghanistan like a secret kept too long, a city that wore its Persian roots beneath a veneer of Greek ambition. Once the Achaemenid Empire's eastern stronghold, known as Aria to ancient geographers, it was reborn under the Seleucids as a provincial capital where Zoroastrian fire temples stood shoulder to shoulder with Doric columned halls. Unlike the glittering coastal metropolises, Ai-Khanoum thrived in isolation, its power radiating not from grandeur but from sheer bureaucratic necessity. Picture a city of clay brick archives rather than marble theaters, where scribes tallied tax revenues in Greek while local officials whispered in Old Persian, their inked style scratching out the mundane poetry of empire, grain shipments, troop deployments, the endless arithmetic of conquest. The Seleucids inherited Ai-Khanoum from Alexander, who'd stormed its walls in 330 BC after a brutal siege. His chroniclers noted its unyielding walls of sun-dried brick, but what truly fascinated the Greeks was its stubborn Persian soul. Even after renaming it Alexandria in Aria, the conquerors found themselves negotiating with local magistrates who still invoked Darius the Great's authority. The compromise, a delicate dance of dual identities. Excavations reveal a Greek-style agora built atop a Persian Apodona's foundations, while clay tablets show Greek loanwords creeping into Aramaic legal texts like vines over a ruin. One particularly telling artifact, a seal stamp bearing both the Seleucid anchor symbol and a Zoroastrian Fravashi spirit, captures the city's hybrid heart. Then came the Great Disappearing Act. When the Seleucid grip loosened in the 2nd century BC, Ai-Khanoum didn't so much fall as fade, its administrative functions migrating south to newer cities. The silt-laden Harad River, which once nourished its fields, began shifting course, turning surrounding farmlands into dust bowls. By the time Roman historians like Pliny the Elder name dropped Ai-Khanoum, it was already a ghost, its exact location debated by scholars for 2,000 years. The modern rediscovery reads like an archaeological detective story. In the 1960s, a French team surveying Afghanistan's Herat province noticed peculiar mounds near the village of Ai-Khanoum. Local farmers spoke of finding old bricks with bird writing, a clue that led to the unearthing of a massive administrative complex. There, amid the crumbled clay walls, lay the smoking gun, a stash of bully clay seal impressions stamped with Greek names and Aramaic script, some still clinging to the papyrus they once secured. These weren't just artifacts, they were paper trails of a forgotten capital, its bureaucratic machinery frozen mid-transaction. What makes Ai-Khanoum's story haunting isn't its ruins, it's the echoes of its irrelevance. Unlike cities felled by earthquakes or invaders, this was a place rendered obsolete by the slow creep of geopolitical drift. The very remoteness that preserved its secrets also sealed its fate. As trade routes shifted toward the Indian Ocean, the dusty crossroads it once commanded became a backwater. Today, the site lies half buried under Afghanistan's windswept plateau, its most poignant relic being a single broken stylus, its bronze tip still darkened by ink, perhaps dropped by some nameless clerk on the day the filing stopped. The empire moved on and history forgot to look back. From the horse-breeding fortresses of Apamea to the river-worshipping streets of Arethusa, these 30 lost cities paint a portrait of the Seleucid Empire in all its contradictions, grand yet fragile, ambitious yet impermanent. Each ruin tells a different story of what happens when cultures collide. The way Ai-Khanoum's Greek gymnasium stood mere paces from Buddhist-influenced statuary, or how Edessa's tombs fused Macedonian armor with Mesopotamian deities. They weren't just cities, they were experiments testing how far Hellenism could stretch before it snapped. Consider the irony. The same rivers that gave life to Seleucia on the Tigris and Antioch on the Orontes also silted their harbors into oblivion. The bridges that made Chalcis ad Bellum indispensable became its epitaph when empires stopped caring about crossing them. Even military marvels like Jindaris, designed to defy human conquerors, crumbled before the indifferent forces of economic shifts and changing warfare. These cities mirror the empire itself, brilliantly engineered, astonishingly diverse, yet ultimately at the mercy of geography, greed, and time. But here's what lingers, the ghosts of choices not made. What if Dura-Europos had never been buried, its multicultural graffiti still visible to the naked eye? What if Charax Spasinu's engineers had outpaced the shifting tides of the Persian Gulf? The beauty of archaeology is that it's never truly finished. Somewhere in the Iraqi desert, Iqni's missing streets may still whisper beneath the soil. In Afghanistan's highlands, another sealed scriptorium like Ai-Khanoum's could await discovery, its clay tablets holding secrets we've barely begun to guess. So tell me, which of these forgotten places haunts your imagination? Is it the doomed waterworks of Antioch on the Cyrrhus or the philosophical echoes of Nisibis's university? The Hellenistic world was vast, and its fragments are still out there, waiting for the right shovel, the right satellite image, the right curious mind to piece them back together. After all, history isn't just about what we've found, it's about what we're still daring to look for.